And then it happened, Book 8, Chapter 9, Gordon's Lesson. One day, near the end of June, Gordon began looking for a summer job to earn some spending money. For days, he had pored over the help wanted section of the newspaper to find just the right job, something that paid well and wasn't too difficult. Finally, he found it, the perfect job. "Look at this," said Gordon, reading aloud to Paul and me from the newspaper. "Wanted. Person to do odd jobs at large home. No experience necessary. Must be hard-working. Apply in person." "Well, that lets you out," joked Paulo. "You've never put in a hard day's work in your life." "Ha! We'll see about that," said Gordon. That afternoon, Gordon rode his bike to the address listed in the paper. He knocked on the door of a very large mansion in the rich section of town, and it was answered by a man wearing a black suit and white gloves. I'm here to apply for the job in the newspaper. Are you the man who placed the ad?" asked Gordon. "I am the butler," replied the man with an English accent. "Come this way." Bowing slightly, he led Gordon into the house and showed him to a chair. Gordon sat down and waited. Glancing around, Gordon could see that everything in the house was very expensive. The person who placed the ad in the newspaper must be extremely rich. A minute later, a man entered and shook Gordon's hand, introducing himself as Mr. Davis. "I'm looking for someone to help me out around this place this summer," he explained. "My regular gardener broke his leg, and I need someone to cut the lawn, trim the bushes, vacuum the pool, that sort of thing. The job pays well, and all I ask is that you show up on time and put in an honest day's work. Are you interested?" "Yes, sir, I am," said Gordon eagerly. "When do I start?" "How about tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp?" "I'll be here," said Gordon. Mr. Davis shook his hand to seal the deal, and Gordon was shown out of the house by the butler, who held the door open for him. The next day, Gordon arrived promptly at 8 a.m. to begin his first day of work. Good," said Mr. Davis. "You're on time. I admire that in a person. Today, I'd like you to cut the lawn. It's a big property, so it will take you all day, but you'll be well rewarded on payday at the end of the week." Gordon immediately got to work, pushing the lawnmower up and down the huge front lawn. It was hot, sweaty work, and it took Gordon most of the morning just to get the front lawn done. As he rounded the side of the house and pushed the mower around to the backyard, he could see the rich Mr. Davis lounging beside his glistening swimming pool, sipping a cold drink from a large pitcher of ice water. Wiping his brow with the back of his arm, Gordon turned off the mower and called out, "Excuse me, Mr. Davis, but do you think I could have a glass of water?" Mr. Davis took off his sunglasses and studied Gordon for a moment before answering. "Gordon," he said, "you should have thought to bring your own water bottle with you today. You knew I expected a hard day's work out of you, and you should have come prepared. Now, I could give you a nice cold glass of water, but if I did that, you wouldn't learn anything. So, tomorrow, bring your own water." Gordon opened his mouth to reply, but then he thought about that nice big paycheck he was going to get on Friday and decided not to argue. He started the mower again and began cutting the back lawn. At the end of the day, Mr. Davis seemed very pleased with Gordon's work. He thanked him and told him that tomorrow he wanted Gordon to do some gardening for him. The bushes and hedges all need trimmed. Tired and very thirsty from his long day of cutting grass, Gordon climbed on his bike and headed home. The next morning, Gordon again showed up promptly at 8 o'clock to begin another long day's work. This time he remembered to bring his own water bottle. Mr. Davis told him how to trim the bushes and left Gordon to get on with his work. Things went smoothly at first, but then Gordon came to a rose garden. The branches were all covered in thorns, and Gordon's hands quickly became scratched and bloody. Gordon went up to the house and knocked on the door. It was opened by Mr. Davis himself. "Sorry to bother you," said Gordon politely. "I'm trimming the roses, like you showed me, but my hands are getting cut by the thorns. Do you think I could borrow a pair of gardening gloves?" Sighing, Mr. Davis patiently explained that he had told Gordon yesterday that he would be trimming bushes and that Gordon should have thought ahead and brought his own gardening gloves. Of course, I can loan you a pair of my gardener's gloves, but if I do that, then what will you have learned? Nothing. It's important to always think ahead and be prepared. Now tomorrow, come prepared. Muttering to himself, Gordon returned to the rose garden and continued to trim the bushes, being as careful as possible to avoid the thorns. By the end of the day, Gordon's hands were in rough shape, scratched and cut from all his hard work. Very nice job, said Mr. Davis, checking Gordon's work. You're working out just fine. Now tomorrow, I'd like you to weed the gardens for me. All right, said Gordon, thinking that he wouldn't forget his water bottle or gardening gloves for the next day. When Gordon arrived for work on the third day, he noticed a large catering van parked outside the mansion. Mr. Davis explained to him that he was hosting a big party that day in the backyard, but that Gordon was to go about his work as usual and try to stay out of the guests' way. Gordon began weeding the garden while the caterers got busy setting up tables and chairs for what looked like about 100 guests. By noon, the air was filled with the delicious aroma of food, and most of the guests had arrived. Oh, those smells sure are making me hungry, thought Gordon. I think I'll take my lunch break now. Gordon headed towards his bike to get his lunch. Opening up the back carrier, he stared in disbelief. He'd forgotten his lunch at home. Sighing, he headed back to work, passing the long tables of food on his way. His mouth watered at the sight of steak and lobster, dinner rolls, salad, and an enormous dessert table piled high with cakes, pies, and puddings. Several hours later, just as Gordon finished his weeding, the last of Mr. Davis's guests drove away and the caterers began cleaning the dishes and removing the leftover food. What do you do with the leftovers? Gordon asked one of the caterers. Nothing. We throw them out, he replied. Throw them out? Said Gordon. Then Mr. Davis probably won't mind if I help myself. I forgot my lunch today and I'm starving. Just as Gordon was reaching out to grab a bun, he heard someone clearing his throat loudly behind him and turned around to find Mr. Davis. Gordon, he said in his slow, patient manner, what are you doing? I didn't think you'd mind. The caterer said that this was just going to be thrown out, and I forgot my lunch today, and I see, interrupted Mr. Davis, and you thought you'd help yourself. I could let you do that, but then what would you have learned? Nothing. Now, put down the food. Gordon put the bun back and stood with his stomach growling while Mr. Davis explained that Gordon would be planting trees the next day. Early the next morning, Gordon set out with his water bottle, his gardening gloves, and his lunch. He even double-checked his bike carrier to make sure he hadn't forgotten anything. It was a cloudy day, but Gordon didn't mind. At least he wouldn't bake in the hot sun. Mr. Davis told Gordon the correct way to plant the small trees and then left Gordon to get on with his task. By noon, Gordon had planted about 100 little trees and was ready for a break. As he sat down on the grass and opened his lunch bag, a few drops of rain began to fall, and before long it was coming down in a steady stream. Gordon ran up to the house and knocked on the door. This time it was opened by the butler. Ah, he said in a smooth voice, Mr. Davis said you might be asking for a raincoat. Great, said Gordon with relief, thinking that for once the rich man was going to help him out. He said to tell you that if he gives you a raincoat, you will learn nothing. You should have checked the weather report this morning, and then you would have come prepared. The butler closed the door, leaving Gordon standing in the pouring rain. By the end of the day, Gordon had finished planting all the trees and was soaked to the skin. His teeth chattered as he pedaled his bike home. If this job weren't paying so much, I'd quit, he grumbled to himself. With all the money that guy's got, you think he could have at least lent me a raincoat. I'll probably catch a major cold after spending the afternoon in the pouring rain. The next day, Gordon headed off for work in a better mood. The sun was shining and it was payday. That day, Gordon's job was to vacuum the pool, scrub all the lawn furniture, and pick up all the dog droppings from the lawn. Mr. Davis had 3 large dogs. It was a scorching hot day, but Gordon set to work eagerly. By 11 o'clock, the sun was beating down on him and he could feel the back of his neck beginning to burn. He glanced over at Mr. Davis, sitting beside the pool with his wife, both covered in sunscreen and sipping cool drinks. Trying one last time, Gordon said, "Excuse me, Mr. Davis, but it's awfully hot today. Do you think I could use some of your sunscreen? I'm starting to get a burn." "Of course I could let you use our sunscreen, Gordon," began Mr. Davis, "but you obviously didn't learn anything at all yesterday, did you? Yesterday it poured rain and you got soaked because you didn't check the weather. Today it's hot and sunny, and again, you didn't check the weather this morning, did you? No. If I loan you our sunscreen, then you'll never learn anything." He got up and went into his house. His wife looked at Gordon with sympathy. "Is he always like that?" Gordon asked her. "I'm afraid so," said his wife. "You see, when he was young, he was very poor and he had to work very hard for everything he has. He did all kinds of jobs, anything to earn a little money. Now he's one of the richest men in town, all because of the lessons he learned when he was young like you. He's really just trying to help you, but it does make me angry watching you work so hard out here just so that he doesn't have to get his hands dirty. Just once, I'd like to see him do something around this place instead of ordering other people about." "That would be funny," said Gordon, "seeing Mr. Davis getting his hands dirty." "I can guarantee you that would never happen," said his wife. "Well, you never know," said Gordon slyly. At the end of a long day, Mr. Davis came out to inspect Gordon's work. "Well, you've done a great job, Gordon. I'm impressed, and I hope you learned something this week." "Yes, sir, I sure did," said Gordon. "Well, here's your paycheck, $200. I hope you're planning to do something wise with this money." "Oh, yes, sir. I'm going to bet it," replied Gordon. Mr. Davis slammed down Gordon's paycheck on the table. "Bet it? You obviously haven't learned a thing this week. Don't you know that betting is for fools? You'll never get ahead of life by betting. You'll lose everything." "Well, I've made some money in the past by betting," said Gordon. "Give me one example of how you made money by betting," said the man. "Well," said Gordon, "I'll bet you my entire $200 paycheck that you won't pick up that fresh dog dropping over there with your bare hands." "Let me get this straight," said Mr. Davis. You want to bet your entire paycheck that I won't pick up a dog poop with my bare hands. That's a foolish bet. If I pick up that dog poop, I get to keep your paycheck and you will have done all this work for nothing." "Yeah, that's right," said Gordon, holding his hand out to shake on the bet. "What do you say?" "Oh, I say you're going to learn a very difficult lesson today," he said, shaking Gordon's hand before walking over and picking up the dog dropping with his bare hands. He held it out to Gordon to make sure there was no doubt that he had won the bet and Gordon had just lost his entire paycheck. I hope you've learned a very valuable lesson today, Gordon," said Mr. Davis. "I sure did," said Gordon, grinning. And then it happened. Just then, Mrs. Davis came outside. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," she cried. "What is in your hand?" "I taught this young man a very valuable lesson," said Mr. Davis triumphantly. "He bet me his entire paycheck that I wouldn't pick up this dog dropping with my bare hands. Just to prove to him how silly betting is, I did pick it up, and Gordon is $200 poorer." "No, he's not," said his wife, reaching for her purse to her checkbook. "You see, earlier today, I told Gordon that you hated to get your hands dirty, and he bet me $500 that by the end of today, he could make you pick up a dog dropping with your bare hands. I think that kid outsmarted both of us. He's going to go I think that kid outsmarted both of us. He's going to go far in life," said Mr. Davis, as Gordon pedalled home with a $500 paycheck in his pocket. End of the chapter.